So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Jason Living, who's the Managing Director at Argyle Square Properties. So firstly, Jason, thanks so much for coming on board and spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Argyle Square and what you do and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Chris, and thanks very much for inviting me to join you. I've my background, I qualified as a chartered surveyor some 30 years ago and sort of worked directly in that industry, mainly in sort of commercial planning work for about 10 years. But early on in that process, I started buying property to rent out property as an investment, residential property. And I was initially in London and moved up to Yorkshire and working in the northeast in the mid 1990s, and from sort of towards the end of the 1990s onwards started to grow an investment portfolio, which we grew pretty rapidly through that period. It was a period of high growth and lots of availability of finance. We went through some pretty challenging times through the property crash, or the general financial crash, but just about managed to come out the other side. We've had some challenges, particularly with lenders not being particularly helpful at times, but we're still here to tell the tale. And really, from my point of view, it hasn't always been easy, but it's always been a case of the longer we can sort of keep kicking the can down the road, that hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel, we will get there eventually. And certainly, I think we're definitely heading in the right direction at the moment. Our portfolio is predominantly in the northeast. Our business is based in Sunderland. We have a few properties in Liverpool and a couple in London, but mainly in the northeast. And one of the effects of that is that we haven't really seen a lot of growth, either in terms of capital growth or rents, until the last sort of 2 to 3 years. And now, we have seen some capital growth that's perhaps flattening out a bit at the moment, but on the rental side, which is what cash flow is all about, our income, rents are continuing to increase quite rapidly, and currently the demand for rental property is very, very strong. So that's what we do. We manage all our properties in-house, so effectively we are our own sort of lettings and management agency, and we're at the point of sort of spinning that off into a separate entity so that we'll be able to offer those services to others. And we'll very much look to grow that both organically and by acquisition of other letting agents in the northeast. So that's the sort of the plan at the moment.
Brilliant, wonderful. And so, when you were growing up, was this the sort of thing you foresaw yourself doing, or did you have other plans?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I always had that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. Whilst coming out of university, I did sort of take a job. I never saw myself as being sort of employed for the long term. Really the opportunity came up to start doing my own thing initially alongside employment, and then it got to a point where really I needed to be sort of more focused on that full time. So around 2000, I sort of transitioned from that employed to self-employed. Luckily at the time, the role I had, which as I mentioned was doing commercial planning consultancy, the firm I worked for initially wanted to keep me on a part-time basis, which I was happy to do. And then sort of subsequent to that, one of our big clients at that time, who were Asda, wanted to retain me on one of the projects I'd been working on. So I had this sort of almost unplanned earn-out or transition period, which worked quite well. So I've really, I guess, been full time since about 2002, 2003 in terms of running and growing our own business.
Brilliant. And obviously, when you introduced yourself, you were talking about you've had some challenges over time. Looking backwards, what would you say are the biggest challenges you've had to overcome over your career so far?
I suppose to pick one, it would be when quite a substantial amount of our mortgage borrowing was with Northern Rock, and having sort of, if you like, ridden along with us for 5 years post crash and and actually, you know, we built up some substantial arrears with them. We paid them all off by 2012, and then they basically demanded immediate repayment of all our loans on the basis that we were in breach of the loan to value covenant with them. And as we weren't in a position to immediately pay those within 7 days, they put the whole lot in receivership. We then sort of very much went to battle with them, and I think about 3 weeks later got all the properties back out of receivership, and then about 6 months later got them fully back under our control, which I'm not sure I've come across anybody who's actually managed to get properties unwound out of LPA receivership. So sort of, you know, as well as being a massive point of challenge, I guess in many ways it's a point of pride, really, that you know, and I think it's important in business to know that challenges are going to come along. I think it's too easy sometimes. You know, let's face it. You know, I've never seen a business plan that anticipated major problems, but yet they come. So nobody really plans for them. But I think I would say to anybody sort of perhaps in those early stages, I think the one thing to learn is just to know that problems come along. So when they do come along, it's not a surprise, and also to take comfort from the fact that, you know, it happens to everybody. You know, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's in business for themselves, certainly who's been in business for any sort of long period of time, who doesn't say, oh yeah, you know, we've had some real sort of challenges along the way. So, you know, it's part of business, and I think knowing it's coming, you never know quite what form it's going to take, and knowing when it comes that it's not your fault, I think is really important. And I think you've just got to have that head down attitude, I think, and just grind it out. And I think, you know, there have been times when literally it's just been on a day-to-day basis. You know, if you can just get from today to tomorrow, then you know, that's one step forward. And I think, you know, these things pass, and if you can find a way, you know, let's face it, you know, sometimes unfortunately it's a situation where, you know, you can't stop insolvency or some event like that. You know, it just is beyond your control. But I think there are many instances where people perhaps just give up a little too easily. You know, and I yeah, for me, I don't know, for me, giving up's never been an option, I guess. And it's more a case of just, you know, just finding that way of keeping, you know, taking a step forward and getting from day to day, and then day to day becomes week to week, and week to week becomes month to month. And, you know, here we are now from sort of a very adverse situation in 2008 where, you know, P&L losses that year were about £1 million, and we probably lost about £5 million in valuation as well. So to go from that period to where we are now, you know, with our heads above water, you know, to me vindicates that attitude of saying, you know, don't just sort of throw the towel in. You know, there's going to be reward if you can just keep going.
I mean, I think resilience is a real common factor through many business owners and entrepreneurial people. And I remember the ex-CEO of Action Coach telling me a long time ago, and he said, Chris, you know, the job of a business owner is to solve problems. And so if you don't like problems, sort of get out of business. And it's, as you rightly say, you don't know what the problem's going to be or when it's going to come. But it's understanding things will happen, and it's how we deal with them that's the most important thing. And yeah, just knocking down the problems to remain here is a massive win. And, you know, underlying things will really develop over time. It's brilliant to hear how you've come through some very, very significant challenges. I know from, obviously, we've known each other for a little while now. And alongside that, what are some of the biggest learnings of business that you have alongside that problems will happen? What are some of the things you've learned?
Yeah, a number of things. I suppose that the one fundamental I would say to any business is know your numbers and manage your numbers. You know, data is absolutely key. And I think looking back at my sort of, if you like, evolution as a business owner, I think when I got into the business, we run a property investment business. You know, a lot of people say to me, oh, it was all right for you because you were a chartered surveyor, you knew the property stuff. Yeah, fine, I knew the property stuff, but I didn't know how to run a business.
Yes.
And you know, and I think so. So having that key data, you know, KPIs, you know, monthly P&L, you know, knowing the levers of your business and you know how to manage things, having cash flow forecasts, and you know it takes time and it's challenging and sometimes you have the danger of being an entrepreneur is you try to wear every hat. And I think sometimes, you know, an important part is to, you know, and I think a real learning for me is to know that it's okay not to be an expert at everything.
Yes.
You know, and I think in a way that's a fault of the education system, you know, that we're you know, you take a broad range of subjects at school, you know, 10 or so GCSEs, you know, and somehow you're expected to be good at all of them.
Yeah.
You know, a mathematician is not necessarily a good linguist, or a good scientist isn't necessarily a good historian. You know, and that doesn't matter. You know, if you're a brilliant scientist, you don't need to be good at history or, you know, geography or whatever. Just be good at what you're good at. And I think it's too easy, particularly as an entrepreneur, to think you've got to be good at everything and quite frankly beat yourself up about your weaknesses, rather than saying, right, these are the bits I can do, and then having I suppose to some extent the courage and vision to bring people in to fill the gaps. You know, so if for people listening, you know, numbers is your gap, then you know I would absolutely, you know, encourage you to get a really good, you know, bookkeeper or someone even maybe slightly more advanced. It doesn't have to be an accountant, but somebody who really understands numbers and can do that management information. So you know, so that management information is key. I think having cash in the bank. I think when I started out, because I started with 1 or 2 rental properties, and you sort of regard that as your income, and then it grows a bit, and it's just more your income. You know, rather than if you like ring fencing that and saying this is a business. You know, it needs to retain that income to grow. I think you know, initially it was just too easy, you know, and I think so having money in the bank, having working capital, I guess, you know, so that you can sometimes buffer against the difficult times. You can buffer variations from month to month, but you know, and it gives you peace of mind as well. You know, knowing that, you know, if you have a bad month or 2 months, that's fine. We'll just pick that up in month 3 and we'll build that working capital back up. So you know, that's something I didn't sort of understand. You know, the importance of that at the outset. So numbers, you know, having cash in the bank. I think those are the big things. And I think having a clear plan of what it is you're trying to achieve. And that changes over time, in the sense you may have a horizon you want to get to, and when you get there, it doesn't mean you're done. You then create another horizon. But really, because you know, we bought lots of property because we could, which is not actually a very good idea to do something. But you know, do something because it's in the plan. You know, it's that old thing. Just because you can, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. And we just bought lots of property because. You know, and I suppose through that period it was all going up in value. So, you know, there was this sort of attitude of, well, you know, whatever we buy this year will be worth 20% more next year anyway. So, you know, but without a plan of what that really meant, and I think again, if I had my time again, that would grow in stages. So you'd say, right, okay, we're now trying to hit this level, and also have periods of consolidation through that. And interesting, actually, I was listening the other day to something that Brad Sugars had done, and he was talking about, you know, the seasons in business, and the fact that in the summer, you know, you do need to reap the harvest, because you know, and I think much as we were doing an element of buying and selling as we went along, I think, you know, there's never any harm in realizing a profit. You know, if you bought an asset and it's grown in value and you realize that profit, okay, it may continue to grow in value, and you may say, you know, a few years down the line, oh, if we hadn't sold that. But I just think there's no shame in banking a profit, because it's not actually a profit until it's in your bank. You know,
very true.
You know, we were sat there with a balance sheet in 2007 of probably, you know, £5 or £6 million in value, which in the space of 18 months to 2 years disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, so it was all very nice, sort of patting ourselves on the back for the profit we'd made, but it wasn't actually a profit we ever made, because we didn't harvest it.
Yes.
And you know, much as I suppose naturally I've been a bit of an empire builder, you know, maybe with hindsight, you know, taking those profits along the way and, you know, maybe investing that into something else and ring fencing it away. So lots of learnings.
I absolutely, and you know, we get the learnings from the challenges we have, I think, more than you know, the successes. You know, because that, you know, that's where they come from primarily, I guess. And I know you're aware we're a business coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who the best coach or coaches you've worked with, whether that's in business, sport, or life in general.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I've worked with one or two people over the years. I think accountability is a big thing. I think,
yes,
and I strongly suspect I'm not unique amongst entrepreneurs in not always focusing on the things I should focus on. And I therefore think having someone to, you know, almost continually pull you back to that, to say, you know, we agreed last week or last month or whatever it was that these were the important things. You know, are they still? Because you've not actually done those, you've done something else. And, and again, I think it's, you know, I think the challenge of an entrepreneur is you see the opportunity in everything, and therefore every time something new crops up, you know, it's the shiny penny syndrome, as it were. But unfortunately, that's how entrepreneurs are made.
Absolutely.
You know, we see the you know, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be a natural optimist. Otherwise you'd never take the risks that you need to take. And you know, running a business for yourself there is risk involved. And there's ways of managing that risk, and it doesn't have to be a reckless risk, but it is a risk counted against, you know, the risk of not doing stuff is that you don't get where you want to get to.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, there's risks of doing it and there's risks of not doing it.
Yeah. No, I bang on. But I love to collect quotes and sayings that people use a lot. Is there any particular quotes or sayings that you've fallen back on or using on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think that Churchill had quite a few, and I think, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it's basically when you're going through, I can't remember quite how to put it, but you know, a hard time, keep going.
Just
keep
keep going.
Again, I guess that comes back to the resilience.
Yeah.
You know, and oh gosh, quotes. You know, and I can't remember if it's a quote or you know, there's lots of things that, you know, you've only failed once you stop. You know, in other words, if you get to a point and choose to give up, then okay, but as long as you're still going. And I think one of your great ones is it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end, which is really amounts to the same thing.
I'd forgotten about that one. Yes, that's I know that's from the best exotic marigold hotel, I think.
Oh, is it? Oh, right.
I'm pretty sure that's where that's from. And I've forgotten that for a while. Yeah, it'll all right at the end. If it's not the end, if it's not all right, it's not the end. And interestingly enough, I've through doing a few of these interviews, I picked up one or two that are relevant and quite interesting. Which was one was a lady said a couple of months ago was we've all survived 100% of our challenges so far. And I think that's really cool because that's reminding ourselves that we have got through them is really, really key, because it it is, yeah, it's not the falling down, it's the failure to get up that is the stopping point. And you know, I've yet to meet a successful person that hasn't had significant challenges over time, because without challenge we don't grow typically, and you know, and we learn very little from, we learn a lot less from success than we do from challenge, I think.
Yeah, and again, coming back to quotes, there's some great passages in Robert Kiyosaki's books about exactly that, about the fact that, you know, we learn through challenge. You know, that we learn most at those points when things are challenging, and you know, and actually running a, if you like, a successful, profitable business is pretty easy. Yeah, okay, getting it to there may not be, but actually, yes, you know, either if it's there when you start or at some point, you know, just sort of gently oiling the wheels. It's the, yeah, it's what to do when the challenges arise, when things go wrong, and as you said, that's when you learn.
Interesting enough, the only, to add to that, I heard Frank Dick speak a little while ago. He does quite a lot of work with us at Action Coach. Obviously, he's an very senior athletics coach.
Yes.
And he was saying, it stuck with me since he said it a few months ago, was that absolutely we all rightly should analyse our challenges and failures to learn from them and grow and change. But he also said, if we don't analyse why we won, i.e. if we don't know why we've won, then it's luck. And that stuck with me, and it's really interesting that I think most of us will, you know, have a big autopsy about why something went wrong, but often don't spend even a little bit amount of time saying, what did we do right there? What you know, why did we win that opportunity? Why did, you know, how did you manage to do those things that you managed to do that no one else has done? And it's good to spend a bit of time on that, I think. And it's but it's not that common to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting perspective, because as you say, you know, if things go wrong, yeah, what we're basically saying is things go wrong for a reason. So it's gone wrong. What was the reason? Well, just as equally, things go right for a reason. So things go right, rather than just saying, oh, you know, as you say, oh, it all just happened to fall into place, and you know, the moons were aligned, or whatever one wants to put it down to. You know, the fact is, you got the result you wanted because you did some things right along the way. So as you said, understanding those and saying, right, okay, so in order to get the result we're aiming for, these are the things we need to get right. So yeah, we've now seen what right looks like, so let's just do that again. And I think interesting, you know, so I think it can often be a fault that people are always looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and as you say, when things go right, they still change them. Yes. You know, and I remember a classic example of this. Somebody was talking about marketing, and they'd had a particular marketing campaign that had gone really well, so they've just moved on to the next one. So, well, why don't you go back and do that? Oh, I hadn't really thought of that, because it's always about, you know, the next thing, and doing something different and doing something new.
Absolutely.
But in marketing, if you found something that works, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work forever, but if you have found something that works, just, you know, keep turning the handle.
Do loads of it. Absolutely, do more of it, and just keep going till you find it doesn't. Or if it doesn't, and then you rightly say, then move on. But until then, we need to take advantage of the fact we found something that really works. So yeah, no, 100%. And what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout this period, Jason?
Gosh. I guess, you know, on the positive side, hopefully, it's that, you know, it's that resilience, it's that it's just always finding a way. You know, when you come across that obstacle, you know, and you know, you come across an obstacle, you can't go through it. You know, you've got to look at every way to go over it, under it, around it. You know, whatever, and you know, and don't stop until you find that solution. I guess, you know, on the perhaps not so positive side, I find sort of I was going to say time management, but the great phrase is you can't manage time, it just happens. So it's more task management. I sometimes find very, very challenging. I think again it's the entrepreneurial thing. I probably have a relatively sort of short attention span, and planning is absolutely not my forte, either in business or in quite frankly personal life. And often we've been on holiday very short notice, and I tell the story. We once went to Turkey for 2 weeks, which I think I booked the flights at 12:15, and we were in Manchester Airport at 2:30.
Brilliant.
I mean, with 3 children and a wife. Brilliant. So but I'm comfortable doing that. Some people that I just couldn't even entertain it or cope with it, and that is my default. And I think what comes with that, which sort of has a positive and negative from a business point of view, I find it very easy to pivot. I can be going in one direction and then suddenly say, right, no, we want to go off there now, or we need to get back the way we come. And the challenge with that is it spooks the people around you, and often, if there are different personality types, which they often are, particularly, going back to sort of DISC analysis and things like that. Some of the sort of S&Cs within DISC would just find that just impossible to cope with. And I have had people work for me who I know are, quite change averse.
Yeah.
And even if you gently introduce stuff, that's a challenge. So if you come in one day and just say we're heading off in a different direction, that does rather throw people. As I say, so it's got positives and negatives from my point of view. I think that ability to not get stuck in that rut and be able to say, right, we just need to go off in a different direction.
I think it's key, isn't it, because things, as you said earlier, that problems always happen, things change, and we need, we need to change with them. We cannot stay where we are.
To be honest, nothing's illustrated that more than the last sort of 2.5 years with COVID and everything that's brought about. Thankfully, probably 18 months to 2 years before that, we had, I guess, over a period, but pretty much transitioned to everything being in the cloud. And we have a remote worker in the Philippines that drove that to some extent, but all our accounting, all our documentation, all our task management, which we run through a system called Asana, everything's cloud-based, and I wouldn't even entertain a bit of software that wasn't these days. But the fact that we've got all that in place, it made it very easy for people to, at the drop of a hat, work from home. Just here's a laptop, go and plug it in at home and carry on. So thankfully we were in a position to do that quite readily. But let's face it, nothing has illustrated more the importance and upside of having that ability to change. And it doesn't apply to every business, but even within the hospitality sector, which literally was shut overnight, there were those people who then went down the takeaway route or did other things, and it wasn't going to instantly replace 100% of their business, but it at least paid for some overheads and kept them going through. And fun enough, I was listening to a podcast just a couple of days ago of exactly that. Someone within the hospitality industry who said, he said when COVID came along, I chose to sort of do whatever I could and do other things, and do some delivery stuff and whatever. And he said, other people in my sector who chose to go home and play with their PlayStation, and their businesses probably don't exist anymore.
Bang on. Interesting enough, I don't think I made you aware, but there's a new TV program on Amazon Prime about businesses being coached and coached by action coaches, and one of them is and it starts just pre-lockdown, not knowing lockdown was about to happen, and the second episode is lockdown happens, and one is a new bar, and it's exactly that. It's they're almost a brand new bar down in South Wales, and COVID shuts them down. But they go into retail and online retail, and then become a bottle shop, and it's that determination to change and just deal with the situation and do something different. I think that's key. So looking forward for you guys, what does the future look like for yourself and Argyle Square, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
Yeah, so in terms of I suppose our existing business, we still have a fair amount of our lending on variable rates. So we're certainly being hit with the interest rate rises at the moment, and we're I suppose trying to keep pace with that in terms of our increases in rent. And the challenge with that is, whilst we can, for existing tenants, increase rent once a year, in line with market rents, we can't just sort of put it up to whatever we'd like to. And people couldn't necessarily afford that, but so there isn't that elasticity of pricing that within some industries, if your input costs have gone up, you just put your output costs up. If you're Tesco, you can put prices up this week, next week, and the week after. If people are going to pay it, but if that's justified. So we haven't got that same sort of elasticity and flexibility, but over a period of time, we can just, I suppose fundamentally, if we can just keep that underlying rent roll growing, both in terms of existing tenants. And again, the challenge with the existing tenants is, where rents have gone up a lot, we won't always, we'll try and phase that over a period. But equally, when properties come empty, and if the rent has gone up substantially, then we can, push that rent up. So it's a matter of, driving that forward to mitigate some of that cost rise. So that's where we are with the existing portfolio. We'll sort of sell one or two. So we've got a few properties in Liverpool, and we've perhaps had a bit more growth there than we have in the northeast. So we've got a bit of equity to play with there, and maybe reinvest that in some of our properties that need some refurbishment in the northeast. But other than that, as I mentioned, really creating a standalone lettings and property management business is something we very much want to focus on in the early part of next year. And that will be a matter of sort of growing it organically and acquisition. The acquisition bit might come first, in the sense that we're actively looking now, so we might acquire a business and sort of merge our own portfolio into that business, and then grow that business. But one of the things I've learnt and not yet, I suppose, fully acted upon is it's an awful lot easier to grow by acquisition than it is to grow organically. You can double your turnover in the wave of a magic wand almost with an acquisition.
It really is.
That could take 5 years of average 20% growth to get to the same point. So that one of the things we looked at earlier this year, and we just haven't really progressed with it, just because, quite frankly, I've had other things going on. But for some years, I've thought there was a lot of merit in creating a residential investment fund vehicle in a very generic sense. And I guess part of the reason we haven't progressed with that previously is, there's an awful lot of regulation around raising funding and FCA and all of those things. But the legislation around creating real estate investment trusts, or REITs, as they're called, changed quite significantly in April, and it is now much easier to create a REIT. The next challenge is drawing that funding in. But I think particularly, who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of years, and there are clearly sort of divergent schools of thought. But I think there might well be opportunities to acquire properties at reasonable prices, and therefore having a look at that as a vehicle for doing that. Because I think fundamentally, you speak to, I would say, most of the population would think that investing in property is a good idea. 95+% of them never do it because they don't know how, or they don't think they've got enough money, or they're fearful of it, or whatever. And therefore, creating a vehicle that can meet that, in my view, sort of inherent demand. People can invest sort of smaller sums and be part of something, but if you like, insulate themselves from the the day-to-day sort of cold face of that business. And everyone hears horror stories about dealing with tenants and those sort of things. And whilst if you manage carefully, and the key to residential property is getting the right tenants in the first place. But even then, people change over time sometimes. But therefore, creating a vehicle that sort of insulates people from that, but still gives them a that sort of long-term wealth building from property. I think there's a lot of merit in that. So, as I said, something we looked at probably 6 or 7 months ago, and it's just slightly been on the back burner, to be honest. With there's always lots of things going on, and again, I think entrepreneurial curse is probably always trying to spin too many plates. But, it's a plate we haven't started spinning yet. But
the next place.
Yeah, maybe. So and there's there are lots of opportunities out there. One of the, and it's not an area of I've sort of looked into hugely yet, but may well do in the near future, and that is there are a number of people who are providing property to either housing associations or local authorities or other independent providers of assisted living and supported living and those sort of things, where because of the way that's funded, there are effectively one can generate a premium rent in relation to those situations. And I know there are some people who are very focused on that market, and certainly it's something that we're beginning to explore. So there are. I think the bottom line is that there are always opportunities out there. I guess it's the challenge is not trying to do too many at once, and picking the right ones to focus on.
That's the trick, isn't it? That's the key.
At the same time as keeping the existing plates spinning as well.
Brilliant.
Whilst riding a unicycle and juggling.
And juggling spinning some plates, absolutely. And I'm interested in what you would say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now.
My sort of immediate reaction is just do it. But I think I would say just do it if you have the right characteristics. I think realistically, and I guess the bottom line is, hopefully, if someone's thinking of going into business, then they've already got some of that. But for an awful lot of, let's face it, for the vast majority of the population, they've either got no interest in going into business, or they're just so risk averse that it's just sort of never an option. But I think you've got to be prepared to take some risk, and that's not you need to do it in a way that mitigates that as far as possible. But if you are massively risk averse, it's probably not for you. And you've always got to be willing to learn. I think is a massive thing. And again, I think it's very common within entrepreneurs. Never believe you know everything. To me, the biggest upside, I would say, of running my own business, and that's through all the challenges and all the rest of it, is that to an extent, there's a sort of a slight cap on it, but fundamentally, you are the master of your own time. And that's not say realistically you can sort of turn up what you want and do quite what you like, because you've got a business to run. But the example I give is that our children, two of them are a bit older now, one's still at school, but sort of in terms of matches, and often they'd have school matches on a Wednesday afternoon, I would sometimes be the only parent there, but I would be there. And that then meant maybe I've got to work Wednesday evening or work part of the weekend or whatever. But having that time flexibility, the number of people who are in iPad corporate type jobs who say, well, I missed the children's pantomime or the nativity or the this, that, and the other. And I can't say I've never missed anything, but I've probably been to far more of those things than most parents. And that to me is the massive upside of being in control of your own destiny, really. And significantly when you are in an employed position. It's a bit of a generalization, but you've sold your time to someone else. and sometimes it's difficult to get it back again. But yeah, no, absolutely. And I I think if somebody's got to the point about thinking of getting into business, then hopefully they've got enough of what it takes, and I would do it. But going back to what we were saying earlier, no, there are times when it's going to be tough. There are times when things won't go right. And just knowing that, and going back to your point of knowing that your role is a problem solver,
Yes.
and as soon as you can within a business, get out of the day-to-day. Delegate is just massively important, because if you're doing the do, you're not running the business.
Absolutely. Very sound advice. Running it and growing it to very, very different things, and it's understanding that and working that. And finally, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old Jason if you were able to go back in time and do so?
It was a difficult one. I suppose that, the things I would sort of do differently are the things I've talked about in terms of business. I think, having an employed position for a period of time was good. If I went back, maybe I'd try and go self-employed, more quickly, but not necessarily. I think there's merit in having sort of an employed role for a period of time. But yeah, absolutely. I would say aspire to running your own business. As an 18-year-old, it doesn't mean you have to do it straight away, and you can still do the university bit if you want to, and those sort of things. But having that aspiration and always thinking about how you can create that opportunity. And I guess for me, in a sense, it doesn't apply so readily to an asset-based business such as property, because there's not particular merit in acquiring a property business. But I also, one of the things that, in terms of trading businesses, rather than going out and starting a business, go and acquire one, and because that's just so much easier. And the phrase I've heard is, you don't, to win the marathon, you don't need to be there at the start. You just need to be in the last 100 yards or meters. You just need to sort of pick the baton up there. So I think that would be it. In fact, the other thing I do differently, which again somebody's really only around to recently, is it's cash flowing property is quite a challenge unless you've got an enormous amount of capital to start with. Therefore, somebody who's very, very experienced in business, said to me the other day, what he has done very, very successfully is have trading businesses that generate good cash flow, and then take that cash and invest it in property. So the trading business is spinning off, is paying your bills and spinning off some excess. But in terms of your long-term wealth building, you're building that sort of property portfolio alongside and building an asset base. And if you then need money to borrow into the trading business, you've got an asset to borrow it against, but they're ring fenced from one another. And if it all goes wrong in the trading business, you've still got the properties. And I've just done it with the property business, and that's been very challenging. And I think one of the things I do differently is have a trading business. And that trading business could be a letting agency, so it could be very related, something completely different. But having that trading business is a good idea.
Brilliant. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fascinating, and I know we talk about resilience and coming through challenges, and you've done that so well, and it really is great to see that you're on it in a better place than you have been historically. So thank you so much. And if anyone would like to contact you at all, what would be the best way to contact you or the company? Probably me personally. Probably I'm fairly sort of prominent within property groups on Facebook and very contactable there. I'm on LinkedIn. I probably don't use it as actively, but I'm there and will receive messages through there. So either of those routes, assuming people have access to one of those, would be the way to get in touch with me. Brilliant. Well, Jason, thanks again, and it'll be good to catch up in another 12 months or 18 months to see how things have developed for you.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted. Thank you very much.
Thanks.